The makeshift lab inside the palace had been repurposed from an unused alchemist's chamber, its stone walls lined with ancient texts and wooden tables littered with vials of glowing liquids. It was a strange fusion of the old and the new. Alara's enchanted artifacts and scrolls scattered alongside the Voyager crew's datapads and medical tools. At the center of it all, Ryan Cook sat on a reinforced chair, sleeves rolled up, his expression torn between excitement and apprehension. Caitlin stood over him, holding a syringe. Inside it, the first human-made Mana Infusion Serum. After days of study, experimentation, and failures, they had successfully isolated the enzyme responsible for mana circulation in Ithera's natives. Using a complex mixture of Arcanis bloom extract, the enzyme, and a stabilizing agent, they had created a formula that, in theory, could allow a human to generate magic circuits. But theory and practice were two very different things. Kevin adjusted his datapad, monitoring Ryan's vitals. "One last check, Caitlin," Kevin muttered. "If this doesn't work, we'll stop the procedure immediately." She cut him off. "I know what I'm doing." Ryan smirked, though his fingers tapped nervously against the chair's armrests. "First human magic user. Has a nice ring to it." Alara, watching from the side, frowned. "You joke as if this is not a dangerous gamble." Marcus stood near the door, arms crossed. "That's because he's an idiot," the captain muttered. Ryan shot him a grin. Caitlin exhaled, lowering the syringe to his arm. Deep breath. She pressed the needle against his vein and injected the serum. The effect was immediate. Ryan gritted his teeth, his entire body seizing up as a burning sensation spread through his bloodstream. He felt as though his veins were on fire, his body rejecting the foreign substance at first. Then, a pulse of energy radiated from his chest. The air crackled. Alara's eyes widened in shock. "Impossible." Ryan gasped, his vision blurring as something inside him shifted. It was like 1,000 invisible threads were weaving through his body, threading into his nerves, his muscles, his mind. And then he felt it, a presence, a flow of energy beyond his normal senses. For the first time in his life, Ryan could feel mana. His breathing was ragged, his heartbeat racing. He lifted his hand instinctively, and a small flicker of blue energy danced between his fingers. The entire room went silent. Alara took an involuntary step forward, her gaze unreadable. "You did it," Kevin whispered, staring at the datapad. "Your body's generating magic circuits." Ryan, still shaking, looked at his own hand in wonder. "I can feel it," he breathed. A warmth, an underlying current of energy, waiting to be controlled. Caitlin, both awed and concerned, checked his vitals. "No signs of rejection, but you're not stabilized yet." Marcus, ever the pragmatist, spoke. "So what does this mean? Is he functional, or is he a walking science experiment?" Alara finally spoke, her voice measured. "It means he is no longer purely human." The words hung heavy in the air. Ryan laughed weakly, shaking his head. "I don't feel different." Alara narrowed her gaze. "Then prove it." She extended a hand, forming a small sphere of mana in her palm, the same one Ryan had failed to hold before. "Try again." Ryan hesitated. The last time he had tried, the mana had burned him, rejected him. This time, he reached out with his mind first. He could feel the energy around him, like a river he had never noticed before. And then, his fingers touched the sphere. No pain, no rejection. The sphere reacted, shifting and pulsing in his grip. Alara's expression softened, but only slightly. "So, you have taken your first step." Kevin whistled. "Holy hell, we just gave humans magic." Caitlin was already taking notes. "We need to refine the process, make it stable for others." Marcus grunted. "We also need to make sure it doesn't kill anyone." Mike, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke. "This changes everything." Hours later, the crew stood before King Alden Velmara once more. Ryan, still feeling the aftershocks of his transformation, stood tall as Marcus presented their findings. "We have successfully created a method to allow humans to use magic." The nobles in the chamber murmured in shock. The king, ever composed, leaned forward. "You are telling me that you, a man born without mana, can now wield it?" Ryan raised his hand, focusing. The energy responded. A small sphere of light formed at his fingertips, stable and controlled. The reaction in the chamber was immediate. Some nobles whispered excitedly. Others looked horrified. The golden-haired elf from before, Lord Silverus, stepped forward. "This is unnatural," he hissed. "Magic is a gift of the world itself. You cannot simply create it." Alara shot him a glare. "And yet, here he stands, living proof that it is possible. The king raised a hand, silencing the argument. Fascinating, he murmured. His emerald eyes glowed faintly, as if analyzing Ryan with more than just sight. Finally, he spoke. Your achievement is remarkable, but it is also dangerous. Marcus expected this. We did not do this to threaten your world, he said firmly. But if we are to survive here, we must adapt. The king studied them for a long moment before exhaling. Then you will prove yourselves again. He turned to Mike. Your companion has unlocked magic. Now you will unlock warfare. Mike's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? The king leaned back. If your weapons and tactics are as powerful as you claim, then I will see them in action. A slow smile crossed his lips. You will train my army in Magitech Warfare. The Voyager crew exchanged looks. Ryan had just taken the first step into human magic. Now Mike was about to introduce modern combat to a world of swords and spells. The game was changing, and the war for the future of Aetheris had just begun. The royal training grounds of Velmara were unlike any battlefield Mike Morgan had ever seen. The soldiers trained with blades, lances, and enchanted bows, nothing resembling modern firearms or tactical formations. Their mages stood behind warriors, casting barriers and offensive spells, operating as support rather than frontline units. This isn't a military, Mike muttered as he stood on the stone observation platform. This is a medieval tournament. The soldiers of Velmara were disciplined, yes, but they fought in a way that left them painfully exposed. No one covered their flanks. No one used cover at all. Battles here were determined by brute strength, magical prowess, and individual duels. That was about to change. Mike turned toward Marcus and Ryan, who stood beside him, watching the training session unfold. They're well-trained, Marcus observed, but they fight like it's the damn Dark Ages. Ryan, still adjusting to the mana flowing through his veins, smirked. Well, good thing they just hired a Marine. Mike cracked his knuckles. Time to introduce these guys to modern warfare. The Velmaran officers stood in a row, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism as they observed the foreigner standing before them. Mike faced them, arms crossed, his stance firm and confident. He was a Marine first, a teacher second, and a soldier always. He took a deep breath. Your kingdom is at war. Silence. I've seen war. I've fought in war. And if you want to win yours, you need to stop thinking like knights and start thinking like soldiers. A burly knight scoffed, arms crossed. And what do you know of battle, outsider? You do not wield a blade, nor do you cast spells. Mike smirked. I don't need to. My weapons do the killing for me. He pulled out his modified arcane pistol, the first functioning Magitech firearm. The officers tensed. Magic-infused steel in a gun? Mike casually raised it, aimed at a training dummy 50 meters away, and pulled the trigger. Bang! A flash of blue energy discharged, and the dummy exploded into charred splinters. The officers flinched. The soldiers stared in stunned silence. Holy shit, Ryan muttered under his breath. You just invented the first gun on this planet. Mike blew imaginary smoke from the barrel. Lesson 1. Range beats brute strength. The king, watching from a distance, smirked. I think I like him. For the next several days, Mike drilled the Velmaran troops in modern combat principles. Phase 1. Cover and fire discipline. Soldiers learned to take cover, using barriers and fortifications instead of fighting in the open. They practiced suppressive fire tactics, using Magitech rifles enchanted with energy projectiles. Mages were integrated into squads, casting support spells instead of fighting solo. Phase 2. Squad-based combat. Instead of dueling, troops were trained to fight in coordinated units. One group suppressed while another flanked. Tactical positioning and formation strategies replaced reckless charges. Phase 3. Magitech weaponry development. Ryan and Kevin worked day and night to mass-produce the first Magitech weapon prototypes. Arcane rifles, mana grenades, and shockwave shields were introduced. Infantry armor was modified with mana runes, creating personalized energy barriers. King Alden, nobles, and military officials gathered to witness the first true test of Mike's new army. The battlefield was set. One side used traditional warfare, knights, cavalry, mages, and archers. The other used Mike's training, modern squad-based tactics with Magitech firearms. The results were brutal and swift. The knights charged forward, only to be gunned down before they reached the front line. Mages tried to cast shields, only to be overwhelmed by mana-infused suppressive fire. Archers fired arrows, but faced energy blasts in return. Within 15 minutes, the traditional forces surrendered. Mike stood before the king. "This is how wars will be fought now." Alden leaned forward, intrigued and slightly amused. "You are turning my army into something dangerous." Mike grinned. "That's the point." The king turned toward Marcus. "Your people are changing my kingdom. I wonder if that is a blessing or a curse." Marcus met his gaze. "That depends on who wins the war." The Solmera Empire would not sit idly by while Velmara advanced beyond them. Spies had already caught wind of Magitech weapons, and the Empire was preparing to strike. In the shadows, the ardent theocracy watched closely, and in the wildlands, the Vashari warlords debated whether to join the future or resist it. Velmara's military had been reborn. The world of Etheris was about to change forever. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the like button, share with fellow sci-fi fans, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of the journey. Stay tuned for more adventures. Here is another video I know you will enjoy.